All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and I hope you're ready for some more Wednesday wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, and the Hermetica and the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs and the Lost Wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus, ladies and gentlemen. This will be episode 4 of this series, and it's titled An Introduction to the History of Hermetics. Hope you got yourself a nice beverage, ladies and gentlemen, because today it will begin to get even more interesting as the last couple have been. Because last time we talked about, probably the last two times, we talked about the golden age of Alexandria in a time where all cultures in a universal city, which is why Alexandria was called the city of Alexandria, the greatest melting pot, this universal city that had men and women of every race and nation, which we covered in the last and the episode before that, probably. Greeks, Jews, Egyptians, Babylonians, Phoenicians, even Buddhists from India, and many more, ladies and gentlemen. And more importantly to us, the great wisdom and the esoteric knowledge of Pythagoreanism, Chaldean oracles and Greek myths, Platonic and Stoic philosophy, Judaism, Christianity, the Greek mystery schools, Zoroastrianism, astrology, alchemy, Buddhism, and of course, the ancient Egyptian religion were all practiced, studied, compared, and discussed together. And you can only imagine the great wisdom that came out of, those collections of ideas being compared and discussed. It is really bright here today, ladies and gentlemen, but I don't mind it. The sun is shining, and it is December 21st, ladies and gentlemen, the winter solstice, 2022. Remember 10 years ago when we were like, December 21st, 2012, it's going to be the end of the world, ladies and gentlemen, and not so much. Here we are 10 years later, enjoying the beauty of the sun. Hopefully, you're enjoying the beauty of whatever kind of weather you have where you are, ladies and gentlemen. And let's dive right into continuing where we left off. Last time we went from the golden age of Alexandria, coming to an end with the birth of the intolerant Christian Holy Roman Empire. And despite the sophistication and cultural achievements of the ancients, the Christians and the Holy Roman Empire deferred to all of these, these collections of great esoteric and occult wisdom. And they just referred to them dismissively as pagans and country dwellers, which we know they had an ulterior motive, ladies and gentlemen. They were trying to squash down the Enlightenment of humanity so they could create a control system and structure that would give them the power. And so they began going around and destroying the greatest things like the Library of Alexandria, destroying great temples, which I would call colleges of esoteric wisdom, pagan temples across the empire, and began the previously unknown phenomena of book burning. So when this happened, ladies and gentlemen, the collections of these, mystic scientists, you could call them, these people who are learned in the great esoteric knowledge of Pythagoreanism and Platonic philosophy and the Greek mystery schools and the Egyptian mystery schools, including astrology and alchemy and many more, ladies and gentlemen, that had to escape. And so for the West, the 5th century ushered in the 1,000-year period appropriately known as the Dark Ages. And this great esoteric wisdom was spread, ladies and gentlemen, to the four winds. They had to escape. And there was some who did escape. And that is the story that we dive into now, today. Where did they escape to, and how did they survive this intolerant Holy Roman Empire, who would not leave any, trace or any semblance of this great esoteric knowledge that once helped us reach, a early Renaissance, so to speak, in times further back than the Renaissance we all know of. So let's dive right into that, ladies and gentlemen. And this part is titled The Hermetica and Islam, or the Hermetica traveling to the east. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's interesting, being it the winter solstice, and, thinking of ancient esoteric knowledge that may not be so common, and how that knowledge can be um, taken and reused as so to appropriate or make people that were used to the quote unquote pagan knowledge, or the greater wisdom of the workings of astrology. So you have this time period, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just roughly, you have this time period where the sun, remember how important the sun is throughout all spiritual traditions across the planet, you know, um, in Christianity, the sun being Jesus, this great figure for so many people. And for me, the great, teacher or wise mystic. I like to think Jesus was like a Jedi, if he really did exist. But nevertheless, that's a debate for a different day. The point is that the teachings have survived, ladies and gentlemen. And this esoteric knowledge of the sun going to its furthest point south, whichever point that is for you, and whatever hemisphere you're on, of course. But for me, here where I am, the sun going to its furthest point south, and then it stops, and before it begins to go back, there is this time period. So today it comes to the furthest point south. Then tomorrow it will stand kind of still, or tend to go sideways rather than south or north. And then after a day or so, it begins to work back through the next cycle. And so it's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, thinking about different myths and stories and religious or spiritual traditions that talk about this dying of the sun, and then the resurrection of the sun, or the restoring of the sun, being such an important point throughout mystical teachings. And that, I think, has a lot to do with this older esoteric knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, that has to do with personal alchemy, using astrology and astrotheology. And if you've never heard of astrotheology, ladies and gentlemen, I consider looking that up. It's very fascinating. It can help you go deeper into these areas of the esoteric wisdom of the ages, or the hidden wisdom, or that special knowledge for a select few that will allow you or assist you on your journey in becoming your very own mystic, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's dive right into, where did the Hermetica escape to, and how did it survive after this intolerant Holy Roman Empire decided to destroy and squash down and sweep under the rug all of this ancient knowledge? So, and once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're reading from the Hermetica The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, from, let's see if I can get that, there we go, from Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Tarsier Cornerstone edition, so a simplified edition to give us, to give those of us who have never discovered this subject an introductory fashion explanation. So it doesn't go too deep, because as they say in the beginning, the Hermetica itself is actually a very, very dense book that's extremely hard to read. So they broke this down in a new way. And I love this introduction to the history of the Hermetica. And if you do too, ladies and gentlemen, then be sure to subscribe, because we'll be going deeper into this. And if you're already subscribed, smash the like button. That'll help the algorithm get this to more interested and open minds, so that we can expand and enlighten humanity. Boom. Now, let us dive right in. The Hermetica and Islam. The book continues saying here, quote, "History shows that wherever the works of Hermes have been studied and venerated, civilization has flourished. Interesting. So you're telling me there that wherever this esoteric wisdom that got squashed down by the intolerant Holy Roman Empire, wherever that knowledge goes, creates a wonderful, flourishing civilization? Isn't it interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that that happens, but yet at the same time, when you squash all this, you have the Dark Ages, and that there's a 1,000-year period approximately, and that there's a book by a man by the name of Anatoly Fomenko that talks about a missing 1,000 years in history. That's a subject for another day, but continuing with the story of the Hermetica, ladies and gentlemen, pagan scholars and sages, we'll think of them as mystic scientists and sages, ladies and gentlemen, fled, running away from this, intolerant Holy Roman Empire, crusading to destroy the great knowledge of the world. They fled to the newly emerging Arab culture. Excuse me, the Arab culture, ladies and gentlemen. I also find that interesting. Maybe it was like a safe haven for these people that were quote unquote pagans, called that by the Christians. But these quote unquote mystic scientists and esoteric sages, they were accepted, I'm guessing, by this Arab culture, because I bet those Arabs knew and had their own version, of course, and they studied together with all the other great minds and great mystical spiritual traditions of the other nations that was in that universal city and many other cities where this kind of thing was going on. They probably still knew that, yeah, we want to, work with and understand what these guys knew so that we can continue to try to use this great knowledge going forward, this great esoteric wisdom of things such as astrology and alchemy, ladies and gentlemen. So these scholars and sages who were escaping the tyranny of the intolerant Holy Roman Empire. I love when it said the Hermetica had to escape on the four winds, going each direction. But they made it, ladies and gentlemen, to the Arab culture, taking their knowledge and the Hermetic writings with them. And that's the book continuing saying that. 200 years later, it continues, the Muslims created an empire whose learning and scientific achievements were unsurpassed. And that's to me very important, because from certain perspectives, you're taught, you're taught to have a judgmental point of view on certain cultures. But when you open your mind and realize that we all are connected to the source or the Tao or the force or whatever it is you want to describe God as for yourself, we're all part of that. And this esoteric knowledge is connected throughout all traditions. And you can see it in the corollaries, or the correlations, ladies and gentlemen. But let's continue. The Muslims created an empire whose learning and scientific achievements were unsurpassed. Isn't it funny how that worked out? I'll read that again. So these scholars, pagans, as the Christians called it, that they were trying to destroy this knowledge, they take it to this newly emerging Arab culture and take the knowledge and the Hermetic writings with them, probably Platonic and Stoic and Egyptian and all the mystery schools. And then 200 years later, the Muslims are of an empire whose learning and scientific achievements are unsurpassed. Well, it's no coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. All right, sorry about that interruption, ladies and gentlemen. Had a little package delivery. It is that time of the year, of course, as you know. So happy Christmas to you, or Merry Christmas, or Boxing Day, or whatever it is that you celebrate, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to have a tradition as we're learning here. And if it's the right tradition, apparently we can make cultures flourish and civilizations flourish. But continuing, ladies and gentlemen, by the beginning of the 9th century, and this is continuing with the book, so quote, by the beginning of the 9th century, the first university was established in Baghdad, called the House of Wisdom. And so it makes you wonder, first thing my mind thinks is, when was this university destroyed? And who destroyed it? And why? May it have been war, or may it have been other reasons, maybe natural disasters. But one thing I often like to think of when thinking of these old world buildings was their beauty in architecture and the awe and splendor of design and size. And it's just so sad that so many of them don't exist anymore for a number of different reasons. But ladies and gentlemen, they built this first university and was established in Baghdad, and they called it, quote, the House of Wisdom, which is what we are here for today, ladies and gentlemen, is wisdom, Wednesday wisdom. We're looking for the wisdom of the Hermetica and the wisdom, the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs. Now, the House of Wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with what the book says here, many pagan works were translated. The sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were then significantly developed. And the ancient mystic spiritual wisdom, it says here ancient pagan spiritual wisdom, but we know the pagans are much better than the description. And that description doesn't quite fit them because they're not just simple country dwellers, as the word pagan means. And so here, many of these mystic works, pagan works they were called, were translated, and the sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed. And these ancient mystic spiritual wisdom, the ancient pagan spiritual wisdom, was covertly studied and practiced. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, they kept it alive. They escaped and got away from the Holy Roman Empire. 200 years later, this wisdom has allowed this Arab Muslim culture to flourish. And in Baghdad, they created the first university called the House of Wisdom. And then still secretly, they're studying and developing and practicing this ancient spiritual wisdom. And they were studying and practicing it covertly. I like to go back to the list of the types of wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, and esoteric knowledge. We're talking about Pythagoreanism, Greek myths, Platonic and Stoic philosophy, Zoroastrianism, the Greek mystery schools, ancient Egyptian mystery schools, astrology, and alchemy. And so they're doing this now after they escaped to the Arab culture. And in Baghdad, a couple hundred years later, at the beginning of the 9th century now, they created the House of Wisdom, or this first college. But ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't just a college or university where they were studying all the occult and esoteric sciences, the mystical sciences, ladies and gentlemen, the pagan spiritual wisdom. And so, continuing here with what the book says, from its exalted position amongst the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, speaking about the Hermetica now, from its exalted position amongst the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for an important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. I bet you didn't know that the Hermetica itself, which after this introduction to the history of the Hermetica and Hermes and the beginning of Christianity and many other things, we'll dive into the Hermetica itself, which is just a few pages away, ladies and gentlemen, so probably an episode or so, we'll see. But I really like this history part because it gives you a background on what is the Hermetica and why is it important and how powerful its esoteric knowledge has an effect on wherever it goes and is practiced and is studied and allowed to grow. That may be the most important part. Wherever it is allowed to grow freely and watered and tended to, like a plant. Take a quick sip, ladies and gentlemen. Our tea here today says a peaceful mind is a strong mind. That takes practice. And that's something we talk about on this channel as well. It's creating peace in your life. And you can find that on the Wisdom of the Ages series, as well as Tuesday Tao, which we did yesterday. Both of those playlists are on my channel. Check them out. Now, continuing here. So the Hermetica, from its exalted position amongst the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for an important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy and the holy book of unorthodox religious sects, ladies and gentlemen, such as the Sabaeans, 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 however you pronounce that, ladies and gentlemen. It continues saying, we would never have heard of the mysteries or the mysterious Sabaeans had they not come into conflict with the religious authorities of their day. So they were so secretive, ladies and gentlemen, which you can begin to see how important, during certain time periods of history. Luckily, we're not too deep into one of those, or probably furthest thing from, maybe. I mean, everybody's got their own opinion on the state of the state of things, but it's like everywhere they went, they were so secretive that we would have never even heard of these Sabaeans had they not come into conflict with the religious authorities of their day. And it was always the religious authorities, for some reason, that were trying to hide and destroy this great, enlightening, civilization-changing wisdom and esoteric knowledge. And so, several centuries after the death of its founder, Muhammad, Islam was beginning to succumb to the same desire for orthodoxy, quote unquote, structure and dogmatism, hierarchies, rules, closed-minded thinking, the kind of things that led to what happened to Hypatia of Alexandria, if you remember that sad, terrible story of the wonderful, beautiful, mystical scholar that she was there in the city of Alexandria. But as you can see, so the story we're getting here is the same thing that happened in Alexandria hundreds of years later. So we go through another cycle, happens in the East, or to the Arab or Muslim culture, to where they got this knowledge and then studied it openly together, all the mystic and esoteric philosophies, which led to a golden age or an enlightenment of the Muslim culture, creating this first ever university established in Baghdad, the House of Wisdom. They created an empire whose learning and scientific achievements are unsurpassed. And then later on, they escaped again. Well, not so much escape, but began to become more secretive because they're starting to run into trouble with certain religious authorities who don't want this wisdom out there. And it says we would have never even heard of these mysterious guys, the Sabaeans, had they not conflicted with the religious authorities of their days. So several centuries after the death of the founder of Islam, Muhammad, this understanding, like where Christianity had been before, when it was side by side with the other ones, when the Greek myths and Platonic and Stoic and Pythagoreanism and Judaism and Christianity and the Greek mystery schools and Zoroastrian and astrology and alchemy and Buddhism and ancient Egyptian religion, Christianity was side by side with all of those, ladies and gentlemen. So was Islam at some point, because they were all working together with the same esoteric knowledge of reality and the universe and the nature of God. And this part that I'm most interested in, which is this great ability that we have to do real magic with, some people would call manifesting or affecting reality with our intention and our thoughts and our minds. And of course, if you're among the religious authorities, you can't have common people learning of how to change the world with just their thoughts. But we can do that, ladies and gentlemen, and that's part of the reason why we're studying the Hermetica and many other things. It's not just a one-faceted approach. You have to have like a whole network that comes together eventually to create a greater understanding. But so as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the same thing happened to Islam that happened to Christianity. It was open-minded and it was side by side, studying along all the great knowledge, the great occult, esoteric, hidden, select knowledge and wisdom that allowed an enlightenment and advancement of their society over a few hundred years. And eventually, unfortunately, they run into the same problem that Christianity did. They begin to create, ladies and gentlemen, they begin to fall and succumb to the same desire for orthodoxy or structured religion. You can't just study all the mysteries of reality, ladies and gentlemen. You have to follow our rules. You see where it falls apart, ladies and gentlemen. And that's fascinating because yesterday we just talked about that subject in the Tao Te Ching. Let's glance there real quick because this is from 2,500 years ago as well, ladies and gentlemen. And it was living without authoritarianism, where Lao Tzu said in the 57th verse of the Tao Te Ching that it was talking about the rules, because he goes, how do I know this is so? He goes, because in this world, the greater the restrictions and prohibitions, the more people are impoverished. The more laws that are posted, so the more rules, the more orthodox we get with our spiritual study, it says the more trouble appears. It says the more laws that are posted, the more thieves appears. But these are just translations from Lao Tzu, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, the sage says, Lao Tzu says, I take no action and people are reformed. I enjoy peace and people become honest. I do nothing and people become rich. If I keep from imposing on people, they become themselves, ladies and gentlemen. So that ties right into what we're talking about here, which you can see this happened to great civilizations that had a time of golden age and enlightenment within the greater cycle, the great year as it's known. And so the same thing happened. I'm going to continue reading from the book here. I keep cutting in a lot just to ramble my thoughts out here, and I hope you're getting value, ladies and gentlemen. If you are, let me know in the comments below and what you think. But so this same thing happened to Christianity. It was side by side with all the mystical traditions, and great enlightenment happened in Alexandria. And then the intolerant Christians, the Holy Roman Empire, said, no, this is not allowed anymore. We're going to have to be real rule-oriented. And then they shut it down and squashed, and this esoteric knowledge had to escape to the newly emerging Arab culture. And then the Muslims create a great empire whose learning and scientific achievements were unsurpassed. This is just kind of a summary of what happened here and how this happens continually throughout history, ladies and gentlemen. And so then they create this wonderful society where they create the first university established in Baghdad, the House of Wisdom. All the pagan works were, at least many of them, were translated. The sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed, and ancient spiritual wisdom was covertly studied and practiced. The Hermetica became the inspiration in Islamic philosophy and the holy book of unorthodox religious groups. Unorthodox, ladies and gentlemen. And then several centuries, that's where it gets sad again. There's always a golden age. Like, yes, everybody, the knowledge is being studied and we're mastering the universe, the masters of the universe, ladies and gentlemen. But you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, unfortunately, several centuries, so who knows how many 100 years, this stuff takes a long time. After the death of its founder, Muhammad, Islam was beginning to succumb to the same desire for orthodoxy that had arisen in the Christian West and in this intolerant Holy Roman Empire. And so, same thing happens, ladies and gentlemen. Heretics were to be rooted out, if necessary, with violence. More book burnings. I add that line. The book continues, quote, in 830 CE, a powerful caliph, C-A-L-I-P-H, caliph, was passing through the city of Haran when he noticed the strangely dressed Sabaeans and questioned their leaders. As to produce their sacred texts, they returned with the book of Hermes. Remember Hermes being Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus. The genius philosopher-scientist Thabit ibn Qurra was a Sabaean who in 810 CE wrote the following rousing defense of Hermetic paganism, or Hermetic wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. He says this, Thabit ibn Qurra, in 810 CE. So he's writing this as a defense against this orthodox, religious style that's trying to squash and root out any heretics that would study the great mystical wisdom of the ages that is responsible for the enlightenment of humanity in the golden ages of any civilization. Now, he says, quote, we are the heirs and propagators of paganism. Happy is he for the sake of paganism. Happy is he who, for the sake of paganism, bears the burden of prosecution with firm hope. I'm loving this. Who else have civilized the world and built cities if not the nobles and kings of paganism? Who else have set in order the harbors and the rivers? Canals, ladies and gentlemen. That's another subject. If you look at the canals in history, it's like, wow, they must have had some kind of knowledge. That doesn't make sense for the time periods that were said they had them. But so anyways, right here, he's saying with this knowledge of the Hermetica and all the esoteric and occult knowledge, in defense, who else have set in order the harbors and the rivers? And who else have taught the hidden wisdom? I've said that, I think, almost every day on Wisdom of the Ages. This hidden wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. Who else have taught the hidden wisdom? To who else has the deity revealed itself, given oracles, and told about the future, if not the famous men among the pagans? He's going, you want to call us pagans? He's like, you want to call me a pagan? He's like, I'll show you what pagans really are. He's like, who else have done all the greatest things in history? And what have you done? You squashed down and destroyed all the greatest things in history and caused the Dark Age, fellas. So he's like, bring it on. Which I'm loving this. I hope you are, ladies and gentlemen. This is awesome. He's going to who else? Has the deity revealed itself and told about the future, if not the famous men and oracles among the pagans? He continues, the pagans have made known all of this. So it's like, we've told you. He continues, quote, they have discovered the art of healing the body. They have also made known the art of healing the soul. They have filled the earth with settled forms of government and with wisdom, which is the highest good. Without paganism, the world would be empty and miserable. End quote. Thabit ibn Qurra. That's applause-worthy, ladies and gentlemen. He's defending this great esoteric knowledge. This great esoteric knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll finish up with this idea here so that we can continue next time. Let's just finish this bit about the Hermetica and Islam, or the Hermetica in the East. So it continues, another unorthodox group within the Islamic Empire who also traced their ancestry back to the thrice great Hermes were the poets and mystics known as the Sufis. And if you remember from the Wisdom of the Ages, ladies and gentlemen, our favorite was a Sufi poet, Hafiz. But these Sufi poets, ladies and gentlemen, they're fantastic. They have the great wisdom of spirituality, of, psychology, the knowledge of both healing the body and the soul, ladies and gentlemen, as Thabit ibn Qurra put it. Hopefully I pronounced that halfway decent. But so this other group within the Islamic Empire traced their ancestry back to thrice great Hermes, or Thoth, Tahat, from Egypt. And this knowledge probably came from before then, from the previous old world, like Atlantis and stuff. And these guys were the famous poets and mystics known as the Sufis. The 12th century Iranian Sufi philosopher Yahya Suhrawardi, Suhrawardi, made it his life's work to link what he called the original Oriental religion. Fascinating. With Islam. So he thought, and it was his life's work, to link this original Oriental religion, which is just another form of this global mystical knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. You remember the melting pot, the universal city with races of all kinds. This guy made it his life's work to link what he called the original Oriental religion with Islam. And so he claimed that the sages of the ancient world had preached a single doctrine. And that's what I was just getting at with this global understanding that has many different names and, focuses or points of view, but it's all a universal wisdom and knowledge of the universe. I love that defense of the Hermetic paganism there, because he goes, who else has done all the greatest things in history? And without this, what you call paganism, the world would be empty and miserable. And so, and this guy who spent his life work studying this idea, he claimed that the sages of the ancient world had preached a single doctrine. That this had been originally, back to the book here, this had been originally revealed to Hermes, whom Suhrawardi identified with the prophet known as Idris. See, this is a deep bit here that we might want to mention again at a different time. But see, this is where you start to realize that all these great figures in different traditions, whether it be Islam or Christianity or, the South American traditions or the, European, Celtic, whatever it be, ladies and gentlemen, Buddhist, that there is these figures that always have different names, but they're like the same dude, Hermes Thoth. So this guy who spent his whole life discovering the connection of this global teaching that had different names identified Hermes to be the same figure as the prophet known as Idris in the Quran, and the same as the Jewish prophet. You've probably heard this name before, Enoch, ladies and gentlemen. In the Greek world, he claimed this philosophy had been transmitted through Pythagoras and Plato. And in the Middle East, through the Zoroastrian Magi. So he discovered the connection, ladies and gentlemen. Because see, if we look that in Alexandria, it was the Platonic and the Stoic philosophy and the Zoroastrianism. And right here, he's putting it all together. He's like, wait a minute. These characters like Idris and Thoth and Hermes and Enoch, and I mean, there's, it's all debatable. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a master on all of this. I'm just a researcher trying to discover the wisdom of the ages. But so this guy, in the Greek world, he claimed this philosophy had been transmitted through Pythagoras and Plato, the Pythagorean and Platonic philosophies. And in the Middle East, in the Zoroastrian Magi, it had been secretly passed on. And so this is how it escaped, ladies and gentlemen. It had been secretly passed on until it had reached himself, this man who spent his life researching it, and us here today, as we learn about this wisdom and the history of the Hermetica, ladies and gentlemen. It had been secretly passed on until he himself, until it had reached him through a direct line of enlightened sages, including his own master, the Sufi mystic Al-Halajah, or Halaj, depending how that's pronounced. But not surprisingly, both Suhrawardi and Al-Halaj, dang it, ladies and gentlemen, they were executed. Every time. I'm just beginning to love a great figure, even though I know nothing about them, can't even pronounce their name, but it's like these were the guys that discovered the knowledge, the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, that can enlighten humanity and create great society in golden ages. And sure enough, both of these great Sufi mystics who discovered this great linking together of this universal religious, idea, unorthodox, they were both unfortunately executed by the religious authorities of the day for heresy. Dang it. And Al-Halaj, unfortunately, by crucifixion. And so you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a repeating cycle here. Wherever this great knowledge is freely researched and understood, you create an empire whose learning and scientific achievements are unsurpassed, and what some have called golden ages in great civilizations. And then hundreds of years later, so the same thing happened in Alexandria and in the Arab culture to Islam and the Muslims, is that they create this great knowledge, and then once again the religious authorities begin to squash it and call them pagans and heretics and get rid of it. And then it has to go into secret teaching once again, which is where it began in the Arab culture. And eventually, once again, it goes back to the same thing. It's squashed down. We can't have this. We need control. Get rid of the heretics. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is another fascinating entry into an introduction to the history of the Hermetica in the Middle East. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, that's deep. And next time we'll be diving right into Hermes and the reawakening of Europe, which will make sense to you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're still here. And if you are, thank you. Check this out. It continues by saying, and this is what we'll dive into next week on Wednesday Wisdom, looking at the wisdom of the Hermetica, ladies and gentlemen. With the Arab Empire becoming increasingly intolerant, which is what we just went through, the owners, once again, of the Hermetic books and this esoteric occult wisdom and traditions and sciences and practices and knowledge, they once again, ladies and gentlemen, traveled in search of a safe haven, a refuge. It was spread on the four winds, so to speak. And in the 15th century, many fled to the tolerant city-state of Florence in northern Italy. Florencia, ladies and gentlemen, in northern Italy, where this wisdom, again, inspired a great cultural flowering. A great cultural flowering, ladies and gentlemen, which we all know as the Renaissance or the Renaissance. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, there's been 3 Renaissances or Renaissances. And every time these golden age periods, these wonderful times of enlightened wisdom in society and the growth of scientific and personal achievements, every time this wisdom and this lost wisdom of the Pharaohs goes there, ladies and gentlemen. And it's what begins to create the greatest times throughout our history. And so, had it not been for the esoteric and occult wisdom traditions and the mystical sciences and wisdom of the ages, which has dismissively been referred to as paganism by Orthodox religions such as the Holy Roman Empire and later on the more dogmatic, Islam, is that it's unfortunate that it gets squashed down every time, but again, it escapes, ladies and gentlemen. And it escaped from Alexandria to Baghdad and from the Middle East now to Florence, Italy, over centuries, ladies and gentlemen. And next time, as you can see, we'll be talking about the dawn of the Renaissance and the Hermetica. Boom, ladies and gentlemen, that was a good one. I hope you loved it. I know I did. I'm super looking forward to diving into the next part because that's where it really gets fascinating. And I'm so glad that we made the points we did today because you can begin to see that there is this cycle. And, whenever this knowledge is allowed and studied and compared and practiced together, great things happen in society. And then religious institutions or, certain groups, you can call them cults or whatever you want to call them, ladies and gentlemen, they begin to want all the power and say, well, we can't enlighten everybody because then we won't be important. And so they squash it down. The knowledge escapes to a new place. The same thing happens. It flourishes for a few centuries and then it gets squashed down again. Has to sneak out and escape. And now we've made it to Florencia, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I love and appreciate all of you. Remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness, a greater understanding of reality, which is what we're learning about right now. And remember to seek out and discover the hidden wisdom of the ages. And also, most importantly, remember that there is no way to happiness because happiness is the way, ladies and gentlemen. And when we can practice and begin to bring happiness to our lives, then, what we've always been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, that becomes irrelevant because we're already there, ladies and gentlemen. Then the entire journey is wonderful along the way. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, be sure to subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, be sure to like this video and leave me a comment and let me know what you think, because these are deep subjects, ladies and gentlemen. As well, expand the description below. You can find those landscape paintings in a link to my Etsy shop in the description below the video, or video info box, whatever you know it as well as a link to the book itself so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf, and a link to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man, ladies and gentlemen. I've been taking it for a few years now, so I don't just say that lightly. And no news is good news, ladies and gentlemen. So give yourself or a member of your family the gift of health for the holidays and a super happy winter solstice in another great year, ladies and gentlemen. At least, hopefully, for all of us. And if not, then hopefully going forward, you'll have a great year. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Boxing Day, Hanukkah, whatever it is for you, ladies and gentlemen. Happy holidays. And I believe I'll see you before New Year's. So next week, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a New Year's edition of Discovering the Renaissance and the history of the Hermetica. All right, thank you. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week with some more wisdom of the Hermetica and Tuesday Tao, which we do on Tuesdays, and some short videos in between now and then. All right, stay frosty.